Hello, I'm James Yardley. I'm the Senior Research Analyst at Fund Caliber, and I'm joined today by Noelle Cazalis, the Elite Rated Manager of the Rathbone Ethical Bond Fund. Thank you very much for being here, Noelle.
Hello, thanks for having me today.
And you're going to talk a bit about green bonds with us, which I know they've been around for about a decade now, but they've become a lot more popular recently. So can you just explain to our viewers what they are?
Yeah, sure. So a green bond is just a type of fixed income instrument with a coupon and a maturity date. The difference, I guess, with a normal bond would be that the project would be earmarked for financing climate or environmental projects. These bonds would be actually linked to specific project and then backed by the issuer balance sheet. So from a credit perspective, you carry the same risk as you would in any other bonds. And they would finance new or existing projects. They can be issued by a range of issuers. It could be government, it could be agency or corporate bonds, as we've seen more and more recently. And most of the issuer would follow what we call the green bond principle. That would give quite a lot of transparency in terms of the project finance. That's been really great actually for us as investors because it allows us to avoid things like greenwashing and projects that perhaps we wouldn't consider as fully green or sustainable.
And more emerging markets are issuing these bonds. So I think Poland in 2016, we've also had Fiji, Nigeria, Indonesia, Hungary, and Chile. Egypt has just issued a $750 million 5-year bond. Are these bonds attractive to you, or would you prefer to stick to developed markets?
Sure. So personally, I think it's really interesting and exciting that we're seeing more and more emerging market issuance. Just because to make a market work, you need to have as much diversity as possible. And for a while, I've been saying that this market was just about short-dated AAA bonds. So it doesn't give you much to play with as an investor if your view around the market change. And so I think it's really exciting. Unfortunately, our fund, the Rathbone Ethical Bond, is a corporate bond fund, mainly investing in sterling. So that's not really our core universe. If I take the example of Egypt, not only it's an emerging market, but it's also high yield rated. So actually doesn't fit our investment parameters. So we didn't get involved, but I would definitely highlight that we're very happy to see that diversification. And we see that on the corporate front as well. But perhaps another point I think that is quite interesting is it really makes sense, I think, for this economy to come to the green bond market. If you think about Indonesia, the threat of the deforestation there is huge. Not only it can be a threat to their resilience as a country for climate change, but also in economic terms, should they not have any forests left in 20 years, what kind of resources can they use? So I think this kind of countries issuing green bond makes a lot of sense in terms of raising capital for adaptation to climate change. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see this market continue to grow quite exponentially. And I guess for us in the fund, we can't really play in EM, but where we find a lot of opportunities at the moment is in the dollar market. So we're looking at a lot of green projects there.
And I believe the Seychelles recently issued something called the Blue Bond. That's not something I'd heard of before. So what is a blue bond, and is this another growing area of the market?
Thanks for the question. Actually, I'm quite a keen diver, so that's a subject that is very close to my heart. And unfortunately, you're not the only one that's never heard of a blue bond. It's still a very nascent part of the market and very much, underdeveloped. I think if I look at green bonds, we're very much on the right path. The market has grown. Issuers and investors both understand this market. This year, we've been seeing social bonds actually taken off significantly. But that's about it. And I think this year, has really made sense for social bonds to be more and more issued with obviously the health crisis. But for me, the next step should really be the rise of blue bonds. So if you think about oceans, they're very crucial for our planet. So I was actually watching the latest David Attenborough documentary yesterday. And you just need to look at it to be convinced. Since the 70s, and the oceans have been absorbing 90% of the extra heat that we've been generating. And so without the ocean, temperature are going to rise very significantly. So I think we need to find a way to fund sustainable marine projects. And I think for me, blue bonds would be a very interesting and powerful way. But unfortunately, they're not very developed yet. I think for Seychelles, it really makes sense because not only they are surrounded by oceans, but also their economy really relies on ocean. Fishing is a really big industry, and the practices there have been quite aggressive. So the fish stock are really decimated. So they really need to protect all the coral reefs or what's left of it. And I think that's why they were, pioneer in that space. So still a very small market, but I think there is a lot to do in that space, and we'll be very interested to see more issuance there.
Yes, I saw the David Attenborough documentary as well yesterday. It's very good, definitely worth watching. You mentioned social bonds as well. I mean, that's another growing area of the market. Can you tell us a bit more about those?
Yeah, so they're very similar to green bonds in a way, apart from the fact that the project or the proceeds would be used for social purposes instead of green purposes. And the market has seen phenomenal growth this year. I think it's up 75% in terms of issuance versus last year. And it's been really exciting actually to see how quickly the capital markets have responded to the health crisis in that respect. So we're seeing a growing opportunity set there. Recently, we invested in the Ford Foundation. They issued a green bond to a social bond. And the proceeds are going to be used to tackle the inequalities. I think foundations are going to come more and more to the social bond space. So that's something that we're looking at very closely. And I wouldn't be surprised, if we see similar trend in social bonds that we've seen in green bonds over the last 10 years.
And over the last year, we've obviously had governments have been flooding markets with lots of debt and things. There's been lots of talk about green infrastructure and so forth. Are you finding some new interesting opportunities to invest in? And what are your overall thoughts on the market at the moment?
Yeah, I think we will. I think the market is going to continue to grow, and I can see two different trends in a way. The first one is green infrastructure and green project. I mean, as you say, last week the Prime Minister said that he wanted the UK to be the world leader in low-cost clean energy, and will invest in ports and factories in order to manufacture new turbines. For now, obviously, it's just words, but I think when these projects will need to be financed, a logical step would be to come to the green bond markets. So I think we can really see over the next few years a lot of opportunities in offshore wind in the UK and renewables as a more general theme. And perhaps, we've finally convinced the UK to issue green bonds. They've actually been a bit of a laggard in that space. We've been lobbying for many years for them to issue green bonds, as many countries have done now, but still not make that step. So hopefully that would also, help them towards that. So I think we would definitely find more green bond opportunities or renewable projects, even if they're not labeled as green. For us, it's the same thing. But I think there is another theme that is quite interesting, which is the wider focus that we're seeing on ESG integration. And effectively, it would force better practices in companies. So in terms of managing environmental risk, but also governance risk and so on. So I think as a result, you could see if companies better manage this risk, perhaps we would see less exclusion because of malpractices in our funds. And so again, our opportunity sets could grow to a larger pool of investments.
Noelle, thank you very much. That's all very interesting.
Thank you.
And for more information on the Rathbone Ethical Bond Fund, please visit fundcalibre.com.